And good morning. It's time for the Mike Hewitt Show, brought to you by Renegade River and Spring Lake. And here is your host, Mike Hewitt.
You know, we tongue-in-cheek kind of started calling this episode of the Mike Hewitt Show the Just Vote No Show. What do you think, Jim Riley?
Well, I think that's a great soundbite for anybody who hasn't done their homework, who is planning on voting in this election coming up next week that will increase your taxes significantly. If you know nothing beyond the specifics, if you don't really know much about it, Just Vote No covers it for me.
It really does. Listen, let me take a liberty here just to kind of set this show's stage up by going over some notes that, frankly, I'd posted on Facebook a few days ago. And I think it's important for the foundation of at least why I'm taking the position I'm taking. Nearly 5 years ago, I was asked to support a tax increase for Michigan road construction and repair. My response was, if Michigan changes the way it contracts labor, draws down on duplicate and or wasted expenditures, pulls back even a single percentage on state university funding, each with outrageously bloated budgets of their own, if Michigan does these things and still needs additional funding, I'm in. I'd support it. Unfortunately, the taxpayers of Michigan are still burdened with prevailing wage and a near inconceivable funding stream to our state universities. Folks, listen, somewhere during the show we're going to talk about how much money of your taxes actually go to these for-profit, semi-public organizations, and it's absolutely alarming. But consider this. A road project contracted by the state of Michigan costs taxpayers consistently 30% more than if a local or a county government contracts for the same road. Think about that for a minute. So if we have a 1 mile stretch of road and the state of Michigan is who seeks the labor for it and contracts for it, it's 30% greater than if Muskegon County or Ottawa County or Kent or who's ever within my voice range contracts for that same road. Folks, I think that's an absolute outrage. The idea that they're not changing that and asking us for more money, to me, is absolutely insulting. That's how I feel about it. Then at the same time, when I talk about the college revenue streams, and you've heard me say on this show before, in fact, by the way, I've been proven that I'm late with a number, but rather than debate it, college tuition, not what the state of Michigan is funneling into these state universities, but college tuition itself has enjoyed more than an 800% increase since 1980. Wages have doubled during that period of time. Tuitions went up over 800%, and we're still funneling state revenue in the millions upon millions of dollars to these universities. I don't get it. At any rate, moving forward, you're asked to give permanent approval of a constitutional amendment for 100 or so words that strain to explain what the actual Prop 1 language. I think it's 10 bills, and it adds up to more than 47,000 words. It's half of my novel. I wrote a novel. I got to tell you, when you start writing a novel for 110,000, 116,000 words, I'm telling you, it takes a whole bunch of thinking to come up with that number of words that don't say anything. And if you're curious what they actually mean, what do those 47,000 words actually mean, get on Google. Google, what does $1 billion look like? You'll see pictures of it. And then times that by 2. That's what those 47,000 words strain to say in 100 on the ballot. I'm telling you, folks, it's a sham. That's my belief of it. The increase in sales tax represents more than a $1.4 billion bump. That's a bit more than the penny we keep hearing about in their commercials. Replacing the current user tax with a flat 14.9% wholesale tax paid directly by gas and diesel stations is nearly a $500 million a year tax hike. That's a bit more than a replacement, and it will, as a matter of fact, using historical fact, not my opinion, cause inflation. Coupled with the 14.9% wholesale tax, the increase in commercial registration fees will cause trucking companies to seek other states to base their small business enterprises. A yes vote is the equivalent of asking them to leave and to take their jobs with them. The dramatic increase in vehicle registration fees will negatively impact those who can least afford it. Think about that. The way they're verbalizing this is they're going to take away the discount they've been giving you. I find that so insulting to articulate it that way. They've been giving me a discount on my 11-year-old Jeep, but now that the discount's going to go away, that when you sit and listen to the things that they're saying, it's an insult. And again, the same folks that are wanting to advance this are the folks that are saying we're just trying to help the little people. Well, it's the little people that are driving 8, 9, 10, and 12-year-old vehicles. But we're going to double their license plate fees to help them? No. I don't get it. I try to get my head around it, and I think, what are we thinking to even contemplate this? A large portion of the transportation budget would be directed toward non-road projects such as mass transit and bike paths, etc. Is that what the commercials are telling you? Because I keep seeing the yellow bus go underneath the bridge, but they're talking about building bike paths. Wait a minute. And not only that, folks, let me just do a little insight on my own notes here. If you look at the Michigan, we keep hearing about Michigan roads are falling to pieces. It sounds like we're in some third world nation. That's just not the reality of it. MDOT roads right now are actually in pretty darn good shape. The roads that they keep showing you pictures of by far and large are local and county roads. But this money is going to trickle to them, and it will be earmarked for bike paths and all kinds of other things that have nothing to do with what they're showing us. Worse than the 40% of the funds generated by Prop 1, almost half of the total dollars, forget our debate over whether the roads are good or bad or whether it's county or state roads that need work and where the money's going. They're telling you, if you actually read this, that more than 40% of the $2 billion isn't going to roads whatsoever. You go, what? I thought it was a road fix bill. Why aren't they showing me pictures on TV? And they're $9 million worth of commercial flights to convince you. They're not showing me any of the other imagery that this $2 billion is going towards. Again, I find that outrageously insulting. Michigan already ranks in 5th place for highest tax gas in the nation. Imagine what this little 1 penny in this wholesale bump will do for that number. Stop already. That's what I'm saying. Stop already. Enough. Budget the money that you've already taken from us. There is no guarantee schools. By the way, part of this is there's going to be some money for some schools. That's why you're seeing a lot of school associations that are excited about this. They love tax, I get it. But there's nothing in this that actually guarantees that the money earmarked for them will get to them. And folks, we've been down that road before. How many different taxes, Jim, have we seen over the last 20 years that were earmarked for schools that got sifted into the general fund and borrowed and loaned and relabeled? And wasn't that the lottery at one point? Wasn't that a portion of Prop A from, 1994? It's just an endless bait and switch process.
Well, we have bought into it. We, the voters, or the non-voters in
Not
particular,
this voter.
Have bought into it. Certainly the media, for the most part, has bought into the fact that more money for anything, let's take education just for the moment, more money always equals better education. In other words, if we give more money to education, we will get better educated students. That has not been the case, clearly, in education. And as you're mentioning very clearly here, has not been the case in the monies that, in theory, have been designated to go towards transportation. And, of course, you touch on the point, which I think is to me, one of the most important points, is the term transportation, especially when they utilize these videos or these photographs of school buses being crushed by falling down bridges, and you have the governor with a hard hat on holding pieces of bridges that have collapsed. The concept that the average person out there would have of transportation is we're going to fix the roads and the bridges. But the reality is that when you give the money, when you finally approve these billions of dollars to the state, those bureaucrats in charge, they redefine the term transportation to fit whatever they want to plug it into. And that, to me, is maybe as much a reason as anything else, which is quite simply, they promise they're going to put it in one area. Their history has been that, number one, they don't keep their promises. Some people would call them liars. And number two, They create new areas that have never that you in your wildest imaginations could never come up with. And let me throw this one number at you. This to me is staggering. We know that the state takes the millions upon millions of dollars from businesses and employees and then gives it back. They call it revenue sharing. How about this? The city of Detroit has 7% of the state's population. What percentage of the state revenue sharing do you think the city of Detroit, with 7% of the population, what percentage does the city of Detroit get of the state's revenue sharing dollars, essentially on an annual basis?
Tell me.
55%.
Right.
So revenue sharing, the term sharing, kind of equal sharing to all those out there. Guess what, folks? Revenue sharing is really little different than what's going to happen with these Treasury dollars. We give this money for transportation. We know where it's going to go.
Listen, a voter messages me on Facebook. He says the government attacks private companies for targeting marketing to kids, yet the government does it into the extreme in this deal. And he goes on to articulate, he says the 1 cent term is just like a car salesman asking a customer to consider that it's only a cup of coffee a day.
I love that. That's really well done.
He is really, this fella here, I'm telling you, is spot on.
And these are not just car salesmen, because I have great respect for car salesmen. These are used car salesmen selling stolen and refurbished cars from Katrina. These are these scumbag liars that are telling you just a cup of coffee a day and you can walk out of this car with nothing down, baby.
Listen, I got to tell you, I've read the 47,000 plus words. First off, it's very, very difficult to read. And the whole time I'm reading it, I kept thinking of the Founding Father quote that says that our legislative acts should be clear and concise, that everyone can understand them. And listen, I had a tough time, I really did, because this is written with, must have been a dozen Philadelphia lawyers and a lot of people with some vested interest, by the way, helped. When I look at it, I think to myself, I try to step back from the detail for a minute and put the big vision eye on it. And I'm thinking, when I look at Michigan's economy, and I keep hearing that, we're getting better, we're getting stronger. All of those things are true. But a lot of the jobs that we've been created have come from two things. First off, they've come from an increase in underemployment. A lot of part-time jobs, a lot of low-paying jobs. That's part one. Part two is nobody can take credit. Somebody somewhere can, but not a political entity that I've been able to discover can take credit for the fact that the sudden surge in economy came from the gas prices getting cut in half. And I'm telling you that the reason this bill wasn't advanced 3 years ago is because they couldn't fit it on top of $4 a gallon of gasoline. And I'm also telling you that if we take $2 billion out of this extremely fragile state economy and try to blow it on lobbyists and their wishes, we're going to get to where the $9 million come from to fund these commercials. Don't forget that, folks. What I'm telling you is if we pull $2 billion out, by now I'm hoping you've gotten on YouTube, or not YouTube, but Google, and looked at what does $1 billion looks like times two. Imagine pulling that out of the fragile economy that Michigan has and thinking that's a good thing. The only people that think this is a good thing are the people that got a dog in the hunt.
Well, maybe not a dog in the hunt. How about a wallet that's going to get filled from it, from your pocket to theirs? Let me just add one other thing in terms of context here, because $1 billion here, $1 billion there, and all of a sudden you start talking real money is a comment from a politician of old. But is $2 billion, we know, is absolutely nothing when you're talking about the federal budget. Certainly, Bill Gates probably would have no trouble just, oh, my golly, we lost $2 billion with his account.
He thinks it's a good idea because doubling his 10-year-old license plate is not a possibility.
It's not an issue for him. That's the point. But in Michigan, let's put the $2 billion in the context of what is the total size of the Michigan budget. And this is a big, big number in the context of what state spending is. The total state budget in 2014 was about $51 million. Much of that was
51 billion.
A billion. Thank you very much. Much of that was for education, and much of that was for administering Medicare, Medicaid, things of that sort. The essentially, and this is simplifying it maybe too much, but the essential state budget that they have to move monies around is about $36 billion. So $2 billion increase is about 7 or 8%. Bingo, right off the get-go. This is a very significant increase in the state budget. Now, keep in mind that this $2 billion increase that's going to come out of the pockets of not only citizens and taxpayers, it's going to come out of the pockets out of those employers, those businesses who choose to stay here after the taxes get bigger. Compare that with the total $34 billion or $36 billion budget. But let's take it one step farther. What is the current Transportation Department budget? What's the current budget? In 2015, the budget was about $4.5 billion. So what we're going to do in the process of taking $2 billion out of the pockets of employers and citizens in our state, we're going to give them an additional $1.2 billion is what they're telling us, even though that $800 million is essentially going to go for fluff. $1.2 billion added on to $4.5 billion. Now, they're telling us, and this is, I think, the ultimate problem, is nobody trusts them anymore. They're telling us that with $4.5 billion, we can't fix the roads. The kids the buses are going to get crushed. The governor is going to have to wear a hard hat every time he goes outside. The roads are going to fall apart. Everyone's going to avoid Michigan because we got horrible roads. $4.5 billion won't cut it. But if we just add $1.2 billion, we'll fix it all.
Listen, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we've got a caller we're going to talk to, and we're going to run through some more numbers. Folks, we'll be right back.
Be a survivor, not a statistic. Renegade River in Spring Lake has new and used handguns, hunting guns, sporting goods, and survival gear. Protect your rights and your freedom. Ask about their CPL classes. Renegade River, next to the police station at downtown Spring Lake.
Welcome back to the Just Vote No Show. Got Jim Riley with me. I'm Mike Hewitt, and listen, we're trying to dial through the facts. When we left off, we were kind of going but I got to pause us for just a brief second. Listen, when I read through the 47,000 insulting words, there are some components of this that I actually agree with that are needed. It just doesn't have to add up to $2 billion, and it doesn't have to cover everything that's got nothing to do with roads. And more importantly, it shouldn't be a single penny until they change the way that they are currently doing business. And I'm passionate about that. I think it's absolute insanity to say that forget the fact that we've been paying, and it seems like every year, soon as the roads thaw, we have this big debate over the roads being, and this has been going on since Blanchard that I remember. Doesn't matter which party's in office, every single spring we have the exact same dialogue. When you dial into the numbers, one of the components is a pretty sizable debt that we've been dragging along, and rather than cutting back a single percent on the hundreds of millions of dollars we're paying to state universities and pay off this debt, we've been making minimal payments on a $200 million, what I refer to as a $200 million credit card. Those kind of things should be absolutely eliminated. I agree with that portion of what this is trying to do. I simply reject wholeheartedly the mechanism that they're using to do it. To me, it's taking the really broken rationale of government that created the debt and then saying, let's compound it. That was such a ridiculous idea. We should make it times two. Listen, folks, on the line with us, we've got Paul Mitchell. And, Paul, you know a little bit about the Just Say No program, don't you?
I do. I've been running all over the state now since, mid-January. And I think I'm among many people that will be glad to see May 5th come and get a chance to vote and move on to actually doing something that's going to fix the roads on May 6th.
I absolutely agree with that. I think everyone agrees that we need to refocus and come up with a plan that makes sense. I think the Bolger plan was probably close to doable. It wasn't perfect. We're probably not. There's no such thing as perfection. Doing what we've been doing, expecting a different result, and all those cliches. Obviously, there needs to be a change. Does it need to be a $2 billion pork barrel? I don't think so.
No. Well, you're right about one thing, or a number of things there, Mike. Expecting perfection of government, we'll be waiting a long time. Let's be serious. But we certainly can expect a better result than we have with this proposal. you were talking earlier in your show about the government's currently spending. What people need to understand is that in the past 10 years, the annual budget for the state of Michigan, just on general fund, general purpose, not including all the restricted funds, the federal money, just the general fund, general purpose money, has gone up by 15%, $1.4 billion a year. It's not that they don't have more money. It's not that they don't have a whole lot of money. In my opinion, the opinion of many, they're spending it incredibly inefficiently. And they're saying, well, because we haven't been able to get around to fixing our roads, and we carry this huge debt you talked about, and we this is the best we can do, so just send us more money. It's an amazing mentality. It would be like my 17-year-old daughter saying, well, I spent all the other money, and I can't tell what I spent it on, but I need more money.
The budget, the Michigan State budget, just in the last 5 years, is up $5 billion a year.
Yeah, the fun part about it is when you look at the math and dial back a little bit, there are roughly 4 million people that are employed in the state of Michigan. And when I say that number, that includes part-time employees, that includes kids working for minimum wage at a local restaurant, waitresses and doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs and everyone in between. So you've got roughly 4 million people that are going to be paying $55 billion. And you go, what? People say, oh, no, Mike, you don't understand. Some of that's federal revenue stream. The feds didn't get their money by osmosis. It came from us in the first place.
Oh, it did. Unfortunately, part of that money the feds got, they just printed it. That
well, they borrowed it from China.
Yeah,
on that credit card I was talking about.
Well, it's like monopoly money for some of them. It's just an astonishing thing. And here's the issue, which your letter talked about so well, Mike, is that all this money is not going to the roads. In the first year, less than 25% goes to fix our roads. We've heard now for weeks from the supporters of Proposal 1 how our lives are in jeopardy. Our kids are at risk. I mean, the list goes on. They've got the school bus going around now with this mock bridge having fallen on it.
Right.
If the people, the supporters think we're at that big a risk, why is it every dime that we're getting is not being spent on the roads?
What's fascinating on that point, Paul, is that actually is two points. First off, the $2 billion is not a one-time shot. This is an every year, not a law that can be wiped away if we think we don't need it anymore. It's a $2 billion constitutional amendment every single year. In this crisis that threatens our children, to your point, more than 75% of the first injection, and I bet you the rest of the years don't look a lot different, but more than 75% of the first $2 billion injection has nothing to do with roads at all.
Well, they talk about guarantees now in their more recent ads. They talk about guarantees. The only thing guaranteed here is we're going to pay, as you know, $2 billion a year more. They talk about guaranteeing better quality roads because they're going to expand the warranty program. Well, there's been 2 state audits and 1 federal audit that has cited our warranty program as being at best mediocre and at worst a failure. And MDOT officials quoted as saying, well, we're still learning the program. Well, it's 18 years they've been doing this. I don't think the public knows that this warranty program that they're trying to get to work in order to make sure that the roads are quality when they're done and they're fixed if there's a problem has been going on for 18 years, and this is the quality we get.
I got to tell you, Paul, let me stop you. I got to tell folks and you a 30-second story. Back in the 80s, my father and I owned a restaurant together. And I don't know anyone's ever owned a small business, especially a restaurant. Folks, it's a challenge. It really is. So we're about 1.5 years, 2 years into this. We've got standing room only, and we're losing money like a sieve. Go, wait a minute. We got standing room only business, and we're losing money like a sieve. So finally, one of our food suppliers, I won't go into who it is because they're still around, they sat down and they helped us revamp our menu, and they repriced their pricing. And then my dad threw them out. I said, why'd we do that? He said, because they could have did that 2 years ago when we were getting in trouble. And instead, they wrung us out for every penny they could get. We don't want people like that around us. Nope. And I tell you that because, folks, this warranty is not coming from the government. It's coming from the companies that we're paying huge money to do these roads. They're finally saying, okay, we'll back our work if you make us.
Well, the other thing, we're paying for that warranty through their bonding costs for those companies. They're not giving it to us for free. It's part of the cost they build in doing these roads. So it's not like we're getting this free guarantee of some sort, even if it worked. I mean, let's be honest about it. If we did it, we wouldn't do it free. We'd factor in some number for the cost of either insuring the work or that.
Just like ragu, it's in there.
What's that?
Just like ragu, it's in there.
Oh, yeah, you bet. And so, I mean, people need to understand that the other thing they talk about is guarantees. That it protects our teachers and police and fire. I've challenged the folks from the Yes Vote campaign to show me the language. Now, you know I've read all this. It's 46,000 words. Multiple times I've been through this. There's nothing in that says there's going to be more money in the classroom. Yeah, they're putting more money in the school aid fund. And you know, Mike, you've been around long enough to see it. The money may go in the school aid fund. There's nothing that guarantees in that language or what they've done in the past that guarantees it's going to go to the classroom. My oldest son's a police officer. There's nothing that guarantees that money that they're putting in there, the municipalities, is going to be spent on police and fire. There's not a word there that says this is going to be spent only to do this. They can spend it any way they want, and they've demonstrated they do. So I'm a little offended, to be honest, at this point, that they keep putting this stuff in commercials. I said that the first thing they try to do is scare the voters. If we scare them enough, they'll give us what they want. And then if we mislead them and misinform them, we'll get what we want. Someone ought to be honest with them eventually. The supporters of Yes campaign ought to honestly tell them what is in this thing and what it's doing.
Well, you know, you talk about honesty. Let me just add this, which I found stunning. We know that politicians, if you're between a politician and a television reporter or a news reporter, you're going to get stomped on as they rush to get their free publicity. And interestingly, last week or so, the Associated Press, which of course accounts for probably 80% of what you read in a newspaper and what's more often than not reported on the TV and radio, the AP mailed all 148 members of Michigan's legislature, Republicans and Democrats, that's the State House, the State Senate, and it asked them three really tough questions. Number one, will you vote for or against Proposal 1? Number two, why or why not? And number three, if it is defeated, how would you come up with the minimum $1.2 billion a year in additional revenue needed to repair roads and bridges? Now, you would think that any politician, certainly we have an election, believe it or not, coming up in less than 2 years, they would love the opportunity to impress us with their intellect and their ability to keep the information flowing and the rest of it. Of the 148 members of Michigan's legislature who were asked these really, really tough questions, only 31 even bothered to reply. That's a 21% reply. So the Michigan legislature is so proud of this bill, so interested in you knowing where they stand on the tough issues of the day, that only 21% even bothered to respond.
Yeah, but listen, I got to stop for a second. Let me make 2 points on that, Jim. First off, the numbers are the numbers. You can't debate those. That said, the State House of Representatives, they passed a fairly workable, it wasn't, to my original point, it wasn't perfect, but it was a fairly workable, with some modifications it could have done what we needed without a $2 billion increase, but rather a restructure of how government does business, which is really what I want. That's what I want. That said, when we talk about politicians, listen, I rarely get into the populist rhetoric. And I mean, the reason I don't is that I think they're a perfect representation of the electorate, the folks that vote them. So if I don't like the image that I'm seeing in Lansing or in D.C., I got to recognize I'm looking in the mirror. They represent society perfectly. So if we really want our elected officials to be different, we've got to be different ourselves. And we have to understand that $2 billion isn't free. It comes from us. Right. And I have to tell you on that point, I think this prop will go down in flames. But I'm wanting the percentages not to be like 54, 40. I want it to be overwhelming. I want a massive message to be sent to Lansing. Don't ever ask us for this kind of silliness again. Don't go back there and get in your caucuses and come up with Plan B that just looks just like this, but something that they can handle on a legislative. I want the public to overwhelmingly tell them this is outrageous.
Well, let me suggest to you that we need to make sure that people understand, that your listeners understand, that the only way to send the message we're talking about is they need to go to the polls. It's not sent through Facebook. It's not sent through. It's by going to the polls and voting on May 5th, voting no. Get 5 of your friends and go vote no. That's the way we send the message. Is you get your friends, you talk to them. You may not talk politics usually with people on the back fence of your neighbor, but this is one of the times. It's the largest tax increase in 50 years. I think, Mike, regardless of what the vote percentage is, we are sending a huge message because we're battling over $8 million being spent by the folks, supporters of the Yes campaign, plus all their friends who are doing things for them. They're in kind. And our group will spend about $200 and some thousand. I mean, we're being outspent, 80 to 1 or something?
Wow, what a difference.
Right.
It's I mean, so we are battling this huge group of special interests, this huge amount of money, through efforts like this, through people like you, through social media, town halls, teletown halls, and we're getting people out saying enough already. We just need to get them to the polls.
West Michigan Politics is a blog, and I'm looking at it right now, and the young man that puts this together lists out, here is who donated to Safe Roads, yes. And then when you look at it, there's no Mr. and Mrs. Smith, there's no John Doe, there's no citizen concerned, there's no somebody that thinks that we ought to do it. Every single contributor, and some of them are in the $1 million+ dollars.
Oh, yeah.
Every single contributor on this list has got more than a dog in the hunt. They're expecting some huge revenue. So
they
when
got their hand in the till.
so when
They got their hand in the till.
that's exactly that, all the way up to their elbows. So when folks are sitting at home thinking, "Oh my goodness, look at that bridge falling on the school or on the school bus," you have to understand that's created by people. They got way more than a dog in this hunt, to Jim Riley's
Well,
point.
they're not trying to sell you on the merits. They're trying to sell you on the fear that if you do not give them money, your children will die. That's the last refuge of a scoundrel.
Listen, and part of Paul's point is that, let me just add some words to you, Paul, and tell me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that they're really banking on, no pun intended, is that May historically has got an outrageously poor voter turnout. And so they're hoping that the only folks that they get turned out are those folks that think they're going to get something, whether it's teachers or road construction people or unions, etc. They're hoping that Mr. and Mrs. Voter stay their butt home.
Well, I think they were hoping that. I think they were hoping that they wouldn't notice that. It goes back to, well, I mean, it really does. You think
Sneak
about
that $2 billion past us.
Yeah, you think about the original campaign, and it was like they wouldn't notice. They wouldn't notice all this extra money. They wouldn't. I mean, they wouldn't care. And yeah, I mean, it would be a special election, and ta-da, we got $2 billion. That went away, and now, you know, when in fact we and a few others stood up, so wait a minute, people need to know what this is. And now, as Jim knows, they're gone to the fear, and they've gone to the misinformation. The whole thing about guarantees, I can't stress enough. The only thing guaranteed is we're going to pay $2 billion more in taxes. That's the only guarantee we're getting in this deal.
Yeah,
you were talking, Mike,
4 million people are going to pay $2 billion.
Yeah. You were talking about the people contributing. A short story for you. I did a town hall up in Gaylord. There were about 60 people there. And afterwards, I talked to people. They had questions. And this little lady comes up. She says, I'm talking with her. She had to be 80-some years old. She says, I'm retired. I can't afford to pay more for groceries, not groceries, but for gas and all these things. So much. I can't afford more higher taxes. I'm on a fixed income. So I'm talking. I said, I understand, and we're fighting that. She comes up a minute later with an envelope, a contribution envelope that we had, and she gives it to me. She says, well, this is to help. And she didn't even put her name on it, which I feel really badly about because I'm going to find her. And it was $5, a $5 bill.
That's America. That's how I interpret that.
That's all she had, but she wanted to help. Now that's people that are committed, and committed for the right reasons.
Those are the real people.
Yes, not the people that are going to ante up a couple $1 million because they hope to be part of the $2 billion jackpot. Those are the voters, and those are the ones we need to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's to me. Listen, Paul. We've got to go to a break. I
understand.
And I appreciate you dialing in and get back out on the campaign
Can we keep
trail.
Paul for just a second?
We'll be back.
Renegade River in Spring Lake wants to buy your used handguns and hunting guns. Renegade River, your hunting, camping, and survival store. Stop in and check out their new and used firearms, sporting goods, Army and Navy supplies, and survival gear. Downtown Spring Lake, next to the police station.
Welcome back to the Mike Hewitt Show, which is seconding today as the Just Vote No show. Listen, when we went to break, it was probably one of the rockiest exits I've ever seen, but Jim Riley was exactly spot on with why he wanted to make that point. So we've asked Paul to stay on with us. Paul Mitchell, tell us, if we actually defeat this monstrosity, is there a plan B? Is there another thing that would work, or are we just going to drop back to cobblestones?
No, we're not going to go back to gravel on May 6th, despite all the hue and cry. First, we need to be. I'll agree with one thing with the spokespeople for the Yes campaign is there's only one thing on the ballot May 5th. The Yes campaign for a long time has tried to talk about what's your alternative because they'd rather talk about any alternative than talk about their plan. May 5th is one thing on the ballot, which is whether or not we think Proposal 1 does even what they say it's going to do, and whether we think it's worth $2 billion. That's what May 5th is about. Now, on May 6th, when it fails, and I believe it will, the question then comes down is what are they going to do? The House has got a number of bills put in place to address the roads. Even Senator Shirkey in the Senate supported Proposal 1 has said that if Proposal 1 fails, that the legislature is responsible for fixing the roads, and he believes that they will come up with a solution that addresses our horrendous roads. Proposal 1 has been effective in making our roads and our infrastructure discussion one in the state.
Let me stop you for just 1 second.
Sure.
I just want to make sure I've got the right vision in my mind. Is Representative Shirkey the same man that advanced the Medicaid expansion travesty?
Well, Senator Shirkey, he was involved with that.
He was at the time. He was a state representative.
Right, he was a state rep at the time. Right, he was also involved in right to work as a supporter of that and a backer of that. Okay. So he's been involved in a number of big pieces of legislation. He's supported Proposal 1. I obviously disagree with him, but I will acknowledge his comment, which is the legislature is responsible for this. He thinks a couple of solutions, and they'll address it. So I think we have to take at face value. We have a legislature. They're going to have direction from the voters. Just fix the roads. As you know, get rid of all the other stuff. Let's just talk about what it takes to fix our roads. And what I've said, and I think the legislature is taking that mantle up, is first, use the money we send you efficiently and effectively. Don't throw it around like monopoly money. Second of which is reflect the priorities of the voters, not the priorities of special interests. Use the money for the things that we talk about are important as voters, not to make them happy. So
Paul, are you agreeing with me? Because I think Plan B is to tell our state house and state senate and governor to do their job.
I think it's to tell them to go back to work. I think it's to tell them to prioritize what they're spending money on, to be efficient. You and I both know that government is not very efficient with money. And when was the last time you heard government agencies say they had enough money? We've got to assist. That's what the legislature's job is. That's what the citizens' job is. You're right about one thing. If we want accountability from state government and our legislators, we need to be involved and say, enough, this is what we expect you to do, and we are going to be watching.
I always have to paraphrase it because I can never remember it, but there were several founding fathers that said our system will only work with a virtuous and informed electorate. And, and we need to do that.
I love that. I love that quote. And I think one of the benefits, and there are any number of benefits for the defeat that will result from the defeat of this bill, but one of the benefits will be the shutting down from the populace, the shutting down of the belief in government that we do not need to be responsible. We can be as frivolous and weak-willed with our money or with somebody else's money as we like because the taxpayer will always bail us out. No matter what the result of this, what happens after this election, if we vote it down, we will at least give the strong message. We are sick and tired of this, and we're not going to take any more.
Reminds me of when my four daughters were very young teenagers, when we'd be debating over something, they'd say, "But Dad, I spent my money on that," as if their money had more value than my money. I've never gotten through with that.
Remember, they got their money usually from you, so the reality is once they had it in their hands, they called it theirs.
Absolutely.
It's quite amazing. Yet you're absolutely right. I mean, it's always easy to spend someone else's money. And here's the thing. I mean, my background's in public policy and economics. I went to James Madison College, by the way, so I firmly believe in that quote from the Founding Fathers, that they're spending someone else's money to buy something for somebody else. It's the most inefficient economic system in the world. The reality is they have no incentive to be efficient. They have no incentive to make sure that it cost is reasonable. It doesn't affect them one bit.
Absolutely right. Listen, Paul, we're almost out of time for the show, and I've got a couple of the things I got to cover.
Sure.
But listen, thank you very, very much for calling in and for the work you're doing.
Well, thank you for the time, guys, and enjoy the weekend.
Very good. Thanks, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Folks, listen, one of the things for an upcoming show that I'm really wanting Jim Riley and I to dive into is this public university funding by state tax dollars. The more I drilled into this topic while looking at the road thing, the more outraged I became. It's actually $1.5 billion that comes out of our state treasury to go to these state universities, which really are they're for-profit organizations. I know everyone says, but Mike, it's for the children. Listen, the outrageous tuition that these young folks are also being. You go through a 4-year degree and you walk away with a mortgage-sized student loan debt, and yet we're still giving these same places $1.5 billion annually. Folks, that train has left the tracks. We have got to get a hold of what's going on. Am I off the track here,
Well,
Jim?
this whole show has been essentially about how does the government spend the monies that it takes forcefully from the citizens and from the businesses. And pretty clearly that none of us agrees that the state of Michigan has done a decent job, even not even remotely close to a wise job on handling the billions upon billions they get to fix our roads. I think taking a look at where the money goes and the kind of debt that we're putting on our students, our children who we are encouraging to go to university, not because it's a great place to party down and burn couches after a basketball game.
Although that must be fun.
Well, I assure you it is fun, but should it be subsidized by everyone and every business in the state? In particular, when the promise is, much like our leaders are telling us today, give us money, we'll fix your roads. The promise is, give us your child for 4 or 5 or 6 years that take on enormous amounts of debt, and we promise you we will make sure that child will get the tools necessary to get a great job. That promise is a lie.
If we don't do anything, we're at least going to indoctrinate them. But listen,
there is that.
What I'm wanting to talk about as we go forward, because we're going to do a show on this. I gotta tell you, when you look at the size of a campus circa 1980 versus the size of a campus now, and when you look at the incomes of their executive leadership in these universities.
Well, the professors, the employees, the increase in staff over the increase in educators. In other words, the number of people who are actually in the classroom compared to the administration growth is unbelievable.
It's just unimaginably went off. It's insanity is what it is. And listen, these lead administrators are getting paid on average of $1 million a year. And I don't have class envy. I don't do populist politics. Having said that, if you're generating $1 million for the University of Michigan or for any of these, Michigan State, Ferris was one of the better ones, and so was GVSU. That said, if you're generating an amount of money for the school or value or worth that earns you $1 million, I guess that's okay. But these folks aren't. They're administrators. And I'm thinking $1 million, how come they spend this money such a willy-nilly way? And the answer is because we've got society so convinced that the only way you can be anything is to get a degree at any cost. And it's that last dovetail, at any cost, that's caused this train to lose the tracks. So it goes back to what I'm saying. People walk away with a $50,000 and $60,000 debt ratio or debt that they've got to pay. That's mortgage size in my mind, sometimes more. These doctors that we all talk about with the medical bills walk away with a couple $100,000 debt. Well, what are we thinking as a society to think, well, that's just the way it is?
Let me put
that's not the way. We should reject that out of hand.
Let me put it in a little different context. In my day, back in the 70s, and actually even into the 80s, students would graduate, and shortly thereafter, the goal was to go buy a home. They would get a mortgage, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. They would get a mortgage. What happens when a person buys a home? Well, of course, they stimulate the economy. They buy carpet, they buy appliances, they do any number of good things. Today, we're taking our children, we're encouraging them to go to 6 or 7 or 8 years instead of the 4, and when they graduate, they have a mortgage-size debt, but they have no home. So, number one, they're not stimulating the economy. It's a total drag on the economy because they leave without the money to buy the things that in past generations we were able to purchase.
Wait till we get into the numbers when we do that show that show you the number of students that walk away without a degree and a massive debt. Folks,
and the debt that will be defaulted soon.
It's overwhelming, the number of people that are not able to graduate because of money, and yet they're still walking away with this 30, 40, 50, 60, and up for a non-degree. or for a degree that at best they're going to generate $35,000 or $40,000 a year in income. But they forgot to mention that at the school counseling center.
Well, just one thing I'd like to add to what you're saying here is the Drudge Report or actually CNBC just reported the GDP numbers, the growth of the economy was 0.2, significantly under expectation. We are entering into a recession, folks.
That was way less than the lie they told us.
Well,
listen, before we run out of time, I got to share, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. Everyone will be happy. But I got a letter from a lady in Spring Lake named Diane H. And this lady really makes me smile. First off, she complimented the show, Jim, you and I, but then she was correcting my English, my grammar. Please revise your have, went to, have gone. And my reason for bringing it up, all jokes aside, is I'm almost done with the sequel to America's Final Beginning. The new one is called The Third Founding of America, and I'm going to be
next book, great.
Yeah, my next book, serious. And so I'm looking for an editor because I got to tell you, the editor situation in my first book was a train wreck. And so, Diane H., if you're listening, write me again or give me a call at Renegade River, because if you can if you can pick up the mistakes I make on a radio show, I'd love to have you be the editor for The Third Founding of America.
I love it.
I got to tell you, first I was a little bit put off, but I went, well, part of it is she's right. If she'd have been wrong, then I wouldn't have been bothered. But then I got to Stu and I said, there's an upside to this, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to see if we can't get Diane H. to make a call, maybe even call the show next week, Diane.
Vote Tuesday. Only 20% or less of the registered voters in the state are expected to vote next Tuesday. Your vote is increased by the power of 5 to 10.
And the part that flips my wig on that is that it is 20% of the registered voters, which means 10% of the eligible voters. How can you not take a stand at a $2 billion debt? $2 billion. What do you think, Jim?
It's your own self-interest, and again, it's not just your money; it is your employer's money. It is the employer of your husband, wife, child. It is the business that pays the property taxes and pays the income taxes that keeps your city and your township and your state running.
Maybe we can get the voter turnout better than the turnout of that survey from AP for the House.
Our legislators, thank you very much, folks.
Well, it's equivalent to roughly a week of your pay every year. So if you're willing to take a week of your pay, knowing that they're not managing it properly, and throw it out the window, God bless you, but not me. I'm going to be standing there voting on May 5th, Tuesday, and I hope to see you there. If nothing else, I hope to see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m. That's what I'm saying. In fact, next week at 9 a.m., Jim, if you don't mind, we're going to talk about my first book as I prepare to ramp up for the second book.
The first one's a good one, and you can get it on Amazon.
That's what I'm saying. So the America's Final Beginning on Amazon, and next week we're going to talk a little bit about the Third Founding of America. Folks, we'll see you next Wednesday or maybe on Facebook in the meantime. Have a great week.
Be a survivor, not a statistic. Renegade River in Spring Lake has new and used handguns, hunting guns, sporting goods, and survival gear. Protect your rights and your freedom. Ask about their CPL classes. Renegade River, next to the police station in downtown Spring Lake.